Hello and welcome to the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast with me, Errol Lawson, where 3 times a week we bring you inspirational interviews with some of the world's most influential Christian leaders from church-based leadership, business, and academia. Now, before we go into today's interview, I've got a question for you. Do you have a coach? You see, the greatest sportsmen, athletes, and every single one of the leaders I've interviewed on this podcast have all had coaches to improve their performance and help them get better results. Now, the number one distinction that I've found from interviewing all these leaders, the top level leaders, and between those and the emerging leaders, is not that they're more qualified necessarily, or they've got more contacts or a better background. The number one distinction is that top level leaders are clearer about who they are, where they're going, and what they need to do to get there. Clarity makes all the difference. Now listen, if you're looking to go to your next level and you're looking for a coach right now, I want you to contact me today to book a free 30-minute coaching session where I'll help you to get clarity in an area of your leadership or personal life that you're looking for right now. Simply email me at errol@errollawson.com today with a subject ready to get started, and we'll get you booked straight in. Enjoy today's podcast. Hello, and thank you for joining us on the podcast today with myself, Errol Lawson, and our special guest today, Sheila Heen. Sheila is the founder of Triad, the Triad Consulting Group, and has been on the Harvard Law School faculty since 1995. And Sheila's corporate clients include MetLife, BAE Systems, Pixar, Tatweer of Dubai, Unilever, the Federal Reserve Bank, Standard Bank of South Africa, Novartis, and numerous other family businesses. She often works with executive teams, helping them to work through conflict, repair working relationships, and make sound decisions together. In the public sector, she has also provided training for the New England Organ Bank, the Singapore Supreme Court, the Obama White House, and theologians struggling with disagreement over the nature of truth and God. She spent more than 20 years with the Harvard Negotiation Project, developing negotiation theory and practice. She specializes in particularly difficult negotiations, where emotions run high and relationships become strained. She's a co-author of the New York Times Business Bestseller, Difficult Conversations, How to Discuss What Matters Most, and recently released Thanks for Feedback, The Science and Art of Receiving Feedback. Wow. Now, we're going to talk so much more about Sheila's background. But Sheila, I know there's a lot more I could say about you. You've been on TV, you've been, Oprah, hey, man.
Yeah.
Fox News, CNBC, you've been everywhere, right? Sheila, before we go into the interview, give us a bit of an insight into your background, if I missed anything in that bio there, and give us a peek into your life right now.
Well, here's a peek into my life. I'm actually at home by myself, except for the 2 dogs in the next room, who we're hoping will not actually make a ruckus while we chat. So I grew up in the Midwest in the United States, in Iowa and Nebraska, and I went to college in California, and I eventually landed in Boston, which was a little bit of a culture shock. Mm-hmm. And I've been here ever since. So I kind of fell in love with the negotiation world, thinking about how we as human beings handle our conflicts with each other, whether that's in our personal lives or our professional lives or international relations. And so I've been with the Harvard Negotiation Project for 23 years. Wow. And then on the side, one of the philosophies of the Negotiation Project is to always have one foot in the real world as well as in academia so that we could help people with real problems and then step back to really think about what we're learning so that we could try to create tools for people that are actually useful to them in their everyday life.
Mm. Awesome. Hey, negotiations obviously a very powerful and useful tool in all areas of life. Well, how does someone start out? How does someone get into that? What was the story around how you kind of got from where you were beforehand to what it is that you're doing right now?
Yeah. I came to law school and I actually took the negotiation course during my first year. The guy who taught it was a guy named Roger Fisher, who wrote Getting to Yes and he's one of the grandfathers of the negotiation world. And I just instantly fell in love. And I thought, this changes everything I see about how human beings interact with each other, that anytime we're trying to influence someone else, we're negotiating. So we all come with an enormous amount of experience, but not necessarily with the self-awareness of what we're doing and what's helping and what's not. I thought I could do this every day for the rest of my life. So far, so good. But from there, we sort of grew into a specialty in particularly difficult conversations, and then into sort of the challenge of everybody else's feedback and little tips and suggestions for us and our reactions to that.
And what role has your faith played? I mean, have you always been a Christian? Were you raised in a Christian family? Tell us that journey. How did that come about?
So yes, I grew up in a Christian household. I grew up in the Evangelical Free Church in the Midwest, in the United States. And my faith meant that the principles for how to be trustworthy, even when you weren't always trusting of someone else, because you're not sure they're being straight with you, but it's always in your interest to be trustworthy to them. All of the principles actually aligned really easily with my faith. And then about 10 or 12 years ago, a friend of mine was running a exec ed program and asked me if I wanted to teach something on Christianity and conflict. And so we decided to pick up the New Testament, and I invited a colleague who teaches at Baylor. And we picked up the New Testament to take a look at, well, how does Jesus influence the people around him, the disciples, the crowds he's teaching, the Pharisees or not? And the question of, can we influence God? So it was just a really wonderful week. And I've always had my foot in the nonprofit world, also sometimes working with churches, and also working across groups, with Jewish groups and Muslim groups, et cetera. So that's been a slice of my practice all along.
Wow. And in working with different groups and, being a leader, person of influence, what's been your biggest challenge in trying to, just as a leader, what's been your biggest challenge? I know it's a big question.
Yeah, it's a big question. I think one of the things that has been probably personally challenging for me is that looking forward, it's hard to appreciate how much I have to learn, right? But then when I look backward, I think, oh my gosh, I'm so much better at this, or I've learned so much about this particular set of challenges of running a business or working with clients or trying to help a community address some important issues. And I couldn't appreciate ahead of time how much I had to learn. I can only appreciate looking back how stupid I was 5 years ago on this front. And so you kind of can get glimpses of what is still out there for your own growth and development. But it's not until you've walked the road that you can even see sometimes that it exists. So I'm kind of dismayed sometimes by seeing those glimpses of how much I still have to learn.
And, I think so many of us can relate to that. Wanting to do so much, seeing so much need and problems to solve, yet the capacity we haven't quite got it just yet. We need to learn some stuff and what have you. Like, how do you manage that? And what's the lesson that you've learned maybe along that? Just trying to think that through.
Well, often what happens is that what I need to work on or learn comes into sharp focus because of something that happens, right? So I do a project for a client that I think is going to be pretty straightforward and et cetera, and something doesn't go the way I expect it to. And looking back, I can see I should have seen that coming. And I think how something doesn't go well or the way that you expected, and you just feel ill afterwards. And you lay awake beating yourself up. And I think trying to change my story about those things in my own head to say, okay, this is actually God knocking on the door, saying, here's an opportunity to work on something or learn something. What is it that you need to learn here? Right. And deciding, okay, this is important enough in some cases, that this is going to be the next 6 months. I'm going to figure out how to do this better. What is it that I should have learned? And there's this idea of getting a second score. Like your first score is how you handled what just didn't go well. And your second score is what did you do as a result? So I may have got an F on this exam, but I got an A in how I handled it because 6 months later, I was so much more capable or, more insightful or more empathetic in the same situation.
Are you seriously fired up about developing leaders and growing your church to the next level? Could you do with someone to help you get some extra clarity or to be a sounding board for your plans and ideas? Great athletes have coaches, so do great leaders. The right leadership coach for you will result in increasing your performance and dramatically increase the results you achieve. Errol is an experienced leadership coach, award-winning author and entrepreneur, and pastor. He has interviewed over 60 of the most influential Christian leaders from around the world for the Rising Generation Leadership podcast, and uses his unique insights, leadership experience, and his passion for the gospel to coach Christian leaders and help them to discover the clarity, confidence, and competence they are looking for. If you're ready to go to the next level, leverage Errol's experience and extensive network of contacts to help grow your ministry or support you in your personal and professional development. To experience the power and benefit of Errol's coaching, contact us now to arrange a free 30-minute strategy session that will help you to understand exactly what your next step needs to be. Email admin@errollawson.com right now to schedule your call.
Let me I'll go a little bit deeper. I just want to get a little bit tactical maybe here. Maybe there's someone listening who right now is they're in a place where maybe they're leading a team, leading an organization even, and they see the challenges in front of them are quite large and their vision might be quite big, but they know that to get there's some stuff maybe has to drop off and maybe there's some learning still to do, and they're in a tension right now. There's a tension there and they're not sure. There's an unease, maybe even stressed out by the whole thing. What 2 or 3 things maybe could they just begin to do to ease that and to move forward in an effective way?
Well, so I guess one of the things that has been the biggest blessing for me is the team that you have, or having someone that you can talk to peer to peer, even if they're not in terms of their role, your peer. They're on your team, or they might be a friend who sits outside, right?
That's good.
And I think that they have such a powerful role to play to help us see our blind spots.
Right.
Because particularly as you get more senior, fewer and fewer people are willing to take the risk to give you candid feedback.
Wow, it's true.
And when we get feedback, our first reaction is to do what we call wrong spotting, right? So the feedback's incoming, and I've got to figure out, I'm scanning it for what's wrong with it, right? Who gave it to me because they're worse at this than I am, and how they gave it to me was totally pathetic, and when and where they gave it to me was totally inappropriate, and the advice they're giving me wouldn't really work. They didn't really understand the situation, and I'm building this list of the things that are wrong with their feedback because it's a way for me to protect myself.
Right.
If I can figure out what's wrong with it, well, then I can safely sort of put it in a box and put it on the shelf and move on with my life. But reaching out to a friend can help me when I'm ready to ask the second question, which is there anything that might be right about it? Is there anything, even if it wouldn't work in this situation, what makes them think it would work? And why didn't I even consider that option? Or if they misunderstood what I was trying to say, it's still a problem for me, right? They're wrong about what I was trying to do, but gosh, that's still a problem for me as a leader if I'm giving that impression. So what might be right about it that I really need to think about it? So the feedback could be 90% wrong, but the last 10% is maybe just what we need to actually be thinking about. And often a friend can help us see that.
That's really, really powerful. Those listening, guys, we sometimes just have to take that pressure cooker off ourselves and get the opinion of others around us. I'm not necessarily saying go and ask for 50,000 opinions, but just having that, we all have these blind spots.
Yeah.
And we could be trying to get so many things done, and we're trying to do this and do that. Actually, someone who's looking from the outside in, giving us their perspective, can be so releasing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that pastors, and church leaders in particular sometimes are in this funny position, which is that congregants and people on the edges of your congregation are often more than happy to tell you all the things that you're doing wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have
Come
all
on now.
kinds of complaints,
Mm-hmm.
which are based on what they feel they need, right? It has to do with why I'm coming here and what I'm hoping for.
Sure.
In terms of my own journey or my own seeking or my own pain in my own life. And so the people on the edges and in your congregation will be happy to offer all kinds of helpful tips and suggestions, some of which may be helpful and some of which are not helpful. But it's the people who are a little closer in, who work with you day in and day out, who are your regular volunteers or your extended core team, who really see what they wish you understood as their leader. Right? I mean, they have a conversation when you're not there. And when you're not there, they say, I just wish he would, or, if she would only, and you aren't there to hear the rest of that.
So there's a leader, right, who their core team isn't forthcoming with feedback, their core team, or that maybe the leader's this kind of, what do you call it? Like, the whole kind of cowboy. It's me, no one's allowed in his circle. How does, because the organization's suffering, right?
Yeah.
Because this leader's not taking feedback or is not acting on feedback.
Yeah.
And if I'm a leader from the second chair, or if I'm someone lower down in the organization and I see these things, and maybe I've attempted to give feedback and the feedback's just bouncing off the person.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah. One of the tough things about feedback conversations is that feedback usually arrives in these very vague labels. So the person giving often believes that they are really being clear, or they're really trying to let the person know. Like, I tried to tell him that it just wasn't landing, right?
Right.
The sermon didn't land. So I think part of the challenge is that you have to have a more detailed conversation. And as the receiver, I have to get past the assumption that I actually already know what people are trying to tell me, or I understand what they're saying, to first, before I decide if the feedback or the advice is right or wrong, to instead just first understand it. What do they mean by didn't land? If we're talking about my sermon, what do they mean by more responsive? Do they mean by email? Do they mean by text? Do they mean that they told me something important and I didn't respond to that?
So good.
Even though I feel like I shoot back answers all the time, but I didn't respond to something that was deeper because I was thinking about it. But that's what they needed a response to. So simply asking, help me understand, if I were to follow your advice, what is it that would change going forward? Or looking back, is there something that I did or that you expected that will help me just understand what you mean? And if I can have that conversation as a leader and as a giver, if I can say, look, I know I've mentioned responsiveness and I probably haven't done a good job of saying what that means to me. Because to be fair, you are responsive about a whole bunch of things. It's this one thing that I think is actually hurting us.
It's brilliant.
We have to be much more nuanced.
That's such great advice. Oftentimes, like you said, we're saying one thing, but the other person's receiving something else. And we
It's a total cross transaction, right?
Yeah. And so, hey, leaders, come on, you may be preaching one thing, you spent weeks getting this message out of you, and people are hearing something completely different. And those of us who are maybe trying to feed back to our leaders or to our teams, like just asking that question, what did you receive from what I said? Or, like you just said there, Sheila, just asking clarification questions to just find out what was actually received the other end is really, really important. So going back to you then, so was there a significant turning point for you along your leadership journey, maybe a aha moment or an epiphany where maybe you were heading in one direction and then something happened and you started going in another direction?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do think that probably in my 20s and early 30s, I felt like I was much more sensitive to feedback because I didn't I was anxious to prove myself as a professional, and I had always done well in school, but I couldn't figure out how to do well, like in the real world, or what the expectations were. So I was doing that, but then mistakes that I would make or things that I missed felt really catastrophic. And then I had children. And they have a very humbling effect, at least they did on me, where I think the experience of parenting has also changed my experience of leading, because as a parent, it was completely clear to me that I didn't know what I was doing, and that at every age, you're figuring it out, right? Just when you figure them out, they change. And they're in a different phase, and you've got different issues on the table. And so I think that changed also my story about what it meant to be growing constantly as a leader. And along the way, I can tell you about upsetting feedback that I've received from clients, that I took really hard, because, you could have 300 wonderful comments on evaluations and then one critical one. And that's the one that burns into your soul, right? That's the one that 15 years later I can quote. And I think accepting that is in some ways the way that we're wired, and that it reflects how important the work is to us and how important it is that we are giving it our very best. And that self-forgiveness when we fall short is at least as challenging as others' forgiveness.
At this stage in your leadership journey, how do you now define success?
I think it's changed, and I think it probably should have changed earlier than it did. So I run an organization. I've got 2 partners, and I've got a core team of about 11. And then I've got an extended team of people we use for various projects of probably 15 or 20 more people. And I think what has changed is that my metrics for whether I'm being successful aren't my own performance anymore. They're how well they're doing. And do I see them really trying to learn from mistakes, or are they defensive and, defensive and angry and dismissive rather than reflective and, choosing very carefully to see, like, what did I contribute to that problem and what do I want to try to change and do differently? And if I can foster that culture on this team, like, we can do anything together. And my job is to make them as successful as possible. And you hear every leadership wisdom person say that. And I've heard a million people say it over the years. I think that at this stage, I feel it in a different way. And I'm worried less about if I'm co-teaching with someone, whether everybody likes me. What I want to make sure is they like Elaine or Whitney or Doug even more than me. And it's hard when you're the name sometimes by this stage in your career that people know. It's hard to think my associate pastor gave a better sermon than I did.
How do you say you have a team member or somebody you're working with, and when they do respond defensively, they're not reflective, they're not asking questions, like, how do you coach that person to realize or to change their behavior?
Yeah. Part of it is being so empathetic to the pain that comes with feeling like you let yourself down or that you're being criticized. Because we all do want to learn and grow, actually, but we also want to be accepted the way we are now.
Wow.
And they have to feel the full acceptance that I completely accept and love who they are now. And I'm so excited about what this could help them do.
Wow.
And if I can start there. When they're ready, we can turn to, okay, is there anything right here? Or what do you want to learn? What do you want to do with this? So that I'm really leaving it like, what do you want to do in terms of trying to make this better or heal the relationship, or come back to talk with the client about what it is that we should change.
Wow.
So that I'm really leaving it in their hands, but I'm there to support and nudge them.
That's great. That's great wisdom. I think it was John Maxwell, I think, said that success can be found in your daily routine.
Yeah.
What does the first 90 minutes of your day typically look like? I'm sure it changes.
3 kids. So my kids are currently 16, 13, and 9,
Okay.
2 boys and a girl.
Okay.
So my 16-year-old gets up at 5:45, and most days he'll put on a pot of coffee so that when he comes in at 6:20, I'll get up to make him a lunch and a snack for, after school sports, cross country, and all that. So I'm up and out, and he's usually really kind. This question of like, can we be kind to each other? His father refuses to make his lunch. He says, like, you're old enough to make your own damn lunch. But I have cast as like, look, this is a kindness. I only have a few more years where I get to make your lunch. And if you wanted to make me coffee, that would be a kindness also. So then he's on the bus. Number 2 is up, getting him out the door. He gets on a bus an hour later, and then we got to drag the 9-year-old out and get her out the door. And then the question is, so I'm working from home most of the time, and I'm trying to structure so that I'm doing what I like to call serial monotasking. So I'm not trying to do too many things at once. It's tempting for me to sit down and start doing my email before the kids are out the door. But I really should just be focused on either what they need or what we need to get organized in the house, right? And then I turn to work. And then I'm really trying to get everything I can out of the way before the end of the day, and including one thing that I've restarted. I fall off the wagon, of course, every few months, but just taking a long walk every day, getting a little bit of exercise and getting outside, because it really does manage my energy. And making sure I eat breakfast to manage my energy, and then think about what are a couple of things I can get out the door quickly, including, by the way, making sure that I spend some part of each day genuinely appreciating somebody. One of the things that was really interesting to me about writing the feedback book is that feedback, there are really 3 kinds of feedback. The easy way to remember those ACE, ACE, appreciation, which is what keeps people motivated, that you see the effort they're putting into things and the impact you're having. And the second is coaching. Here are some suggestions for how you could grow or do it better. And then evaluations, just here's where you stand in terms of expectations or what to expect in the future. And so I really try, appreciation has to be specific and genuine. And if I can remind myself each morning, who's really gone above and beyond, who I just want to send a quick note to before I start my day, whether that's on the client side, within my own team, in the family. It also changes me in terms of my orientation for the day as well.
Brilliant, man. And are there any other key habits that that have contributed to your success?
Some of it, I suppose, is just trying to make sure I keep reading, and reading a mixture of fiction and nonfiction, but reading in my field broadly. And negotiation and conflict resolution is very interdisciplinary. So I'm trying to read stuff about leadership, about influence, about neuroscience, about social psychology, and just trying to keep up and with what's out there that we might be able to learn from. Is a habit that I got from my mentor, Roger Fisher, and also my co-author and business partner, Doug Stone, is just amazing about...
How much do you read, like a day, a week, a month? How much do you...
A lot of it is, stolen moments in between times, sitting in airport lounges and trying just to keep a running list of things that I dump into a folder, like when I have time, skim this. And it's not that I read every word, but just skimming it so that I have an idea of, okay, what's new here? What's interesting? And what connections can we make? That I think has helped me not, or try, because I think we can be prisoners of our own little world and get really isolated rather than really trying to reach out and learn from what others are doing elsewhere that we could bring in to the community where we're trying to build something important. Yeah.
And what's your biggest weakness as a leader?
Oh, golly. I have to rank them, huh? I'm probably more scattered than is good for anybody in terms of organizational skills. And it means that my admin support, I lean on them pretty heavily, and I go in and out of whether I'm really doing a good job of keeping track of the tasks and the emails that I have not kept up with and need to get back to. And I think leaving somebody hanging or waiting is something that I feel like I'm constantly apologizing for. And it's non-discriminatory. It could be my mother or my best friend or, a request for, a piece of writing, which I need learning to say no. I can't do that. This is what I'm not going to do this week or this month or this year. I think is the hardest thing, particularly when you want to make other people happy.
And what's your biggest strength on the flip side?
I love people. I mean, I just find them fascinating. And so I think after being a really, really shy kid, I learned actually from Doug that in social situations like a cocktail hour or something where I have to like talk to people that I don't know, which is, I feel like I'm in junior high. And I feel really anxious about it. And he taught me that you don't have to be interesting. You just have to be interested. And that asking people like real questions, not the surfacey small talk questions, means I have gotten so much better at social situations. And because I'm genuinely interested, I feel like I get to know people pretty quickly and really in a more interesting way than I did probably 15 years ago before I kind of learned this.
And I think that's such a key thing, especially for those, for people who have a fear of networking, fear of connecting with people. It's not about us, it's being interesting or being cool or whatever else, funny. Just being interested in others. Really, really great. Simple, powerful tip, man. Was there anything like holding you back? Like when you kind of got launching out into your journey, maybe before law school, maybe when you were just starting the company and going to another position, was anything holding you back at all?
Debt.
It's real.
So I mostly put myself through college, working 3 jobs and borrowing. And having some scholarship money. And then I borrowed to put myself through law school. And so when I graduated, I had about $115,000 in debt.
Wow.
And then I got married and he also had debt. So it doubled from law school. We met in law school. So I think the question of, can I afford to take this job instead of going to a law firm, which would cover my debt and I would pay it off faster, but the opportunity, it's not really a career path in the negotiation world. You got to make up your own path, which, Christian leaders have to do all the time, was scary. And especially because I came into it with so much debt. And so just prioritizing paying that off as fast as I could, or we could, and seeing money as really freedom Like if we can pay off the debt and we can have a solid foundation, then we have the autonomy to do whatever we want. But let's not wait until then to do what really matters and what we care about. So about 7 years or 8 years after graduating, we finally paid off all of that student loan debt and had a zero net worth party. Nothing, which was such a
amazing. Yeah, I can imagine.
But yeah, I think that the question of how does this heart for what a difference you could make in the world, how does that intersect with finances and making it work?
It's a big one. I think, if huge. Someone's got that debt in their life and they're trying to move forward, it'd be good for you to speak into this, because I think there's I've been in a similar place myself, having ambitions and dreams and goals and making a difference here and there and influence here and there. But this debt on my back, and if only people knew what I was really having to deal with, if only people knew. Like, how do you navigate that, man? How do you gave some real practical things there, focus on getting it paid off. Are there any more tips you can give us?
Money is conversations about money with ourselves and our partners and our organization are never just about money. And money means something. It plays an emotional role for each of us. Wow. And for me, it means freedom. Like if I can live below my means, etc., I actually have the freedom to do whatever I want. For other people, it means, status or knowing for themselves that they've quote unquote arrived, or it means reward for, I've worked hard, so I deserve this. For some, it's I've got to prove to someone else, like my father will finally feel like I made something of myself. And so for me, really thinking about what is the role that money is playing for me, and is that helping me or not? Do I need to change something there? And then just connecting with communities of people with similar values around money, because society at large, certainly in the United States, does not carry a set of values that are helpful on this front. So, there's a website called Mr. Money Mustache. It's all about, squirreling everything away and retiring early and knowing what really matters in life. It's not a Christian website, but it's a community of people who have values that I think are very aligned, and that help you feel like, I'm not in this by myself, as I have to make different choices than the people next door, or I have to really get serious about sacrificing some things so that I can buy myself freedom from anxiety or whatever it would be later. And it's a lot about emotional management. Yeah, Mr. Money Mustache. It's fantastic.
Cool, man. We'll put that in the show notes for you guys. Almost done. Who have been your most significant mentors along your journey?
Oh, gosh, that's a great question. Well, I've mentioned Roger Fisher a couple of times. He founded the negotiation project at Harvard, but most importantly, to really understand Roger, he fought in World War II in both the Atlantic and the Pacific. And when he came home from the war, he found that there were 6 roommates who started college together before they all stopped out to go to war, and he was the only one who came home. And so he sort of dedicated the rest of his life to finding better ways for us to handle conflict.
Wow.
And so he was an incredibly inspirational person, and Getting TS is still the best book out there on conflict resolution and negotiation, I think, globally. My father was also an entrepreneur, and I think in terms of risk-taking and tolerance and his attitude toward money, which is money is just money. It comes, it goes. It's not what's really important in life. And if you do what you love and you're doing something valuable for other people, money will come in different ways at different times. And I think that helped me sort of have the courage to step off the usual path and to feel like I could take that risk.
That's one more person. I've got another question for you. What you said there. What you just said there about your dad giving you that that input, that freedom, that confidence, that courage to actually step off the beaten path.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful thing. Having a parent who can give you that confidence. And I think as leaders, for us, it's how we give confidence to others as well, isn't it? In the same way, I'm sure you do the same for your children. Yes. And I mean, how did that change you, your thinking, having that, confidence?
Well, my father now jokes. So my father had 3 girls, and all 3 of us are married. And of the 6 of us, spouses included, only one of us has a real job. So he thinks maybe he did the job a little bit. Because we're all entrepreneurs in various ways.
Wow. It's great, though. It's great.
But, I have to say that I feel really lucky to have had that orientation. He called it write your own ticket. I want you to be in a place where you can write your own ticket and not be dependent on an employer or et cetera, because you can create something of value in the world. But the people that I admire the most, frankly, are the people whose parents did not teach them that, and yet are changing that story for themselves. I mean, a couple of my colleagues have parents who really opposed them stepping off that safe path, and going to a law firm or getting the steady job to pursue something that means so much to them and where they feel much more fulfilled. And they've had to say to their parents, I know that this is what you taught me my whole life, but it's not who I am, or it's not who I want to be in the world. And for me, doing the self-reflection and having the courage to do that and to say, I know once you see what this means and what it can be, then you'll change your mind. And I'm willing to sort of walk that path with you in the meantime while you think I'm making the wrong choice.
That's great, man. What was the best piece of advice that Roger gave you or has given you?
Oh, golly, there are so many. So many. One of them was that there are a million commentators out there who will describe the problem, but there aren't many who will be able to figure out what to do about the problem. So you've got all kinds of critics and you've got all kinds of analysts, but there's always something you can do that can start to make progress or to heal that relationship or to reconnect the community. So for instance, in Cyprus, the Greek and Turkish Cypriots are separated, right? There's a it's called the Green Line between the two. And you're not going to solve that conflict, in a week. You're going to end up slowly building a bi-communal community and connecting people across that line. In the 90s, they weren't allowed to cross the checkpoint. So they hadn't seen anyone from the other side for 25 years, since 1974. And so having the long view that there's always something you can do to move toward peace, and that peace isn't a piece of paper. The piece of paper is somewhere along the way, but peace is really the process of reconciliation. And that takes time, and you can be strategic in helping people actually start to take the first few steps.
So his advice was?
Peace isn't a piece of paper, and there's always something you can do. Even when it's in its darkest days, and things seem to have fallen apart, like in South Africa, with the new constitution, there were certainly times where things broke down.
Yeah.
But pick up the phone. Up the phone.
It's a process, right? It's a journey.
Behind the scenes, start to talk about, all right, now what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's good. You are so wise. Is there one more mentor you can think of?
The coffee helps.
Is there another mentor, maybe? One last mentor?
One more mentor? Well, the person that we haven't talked about is my mother. Okay. Because she was really the center of faith in our family.
Okay.
And her orientation is you're built with talents to do something for the world, and listen to what God has given you and what you might be able to do to help others. And her very clear sense of the purpose and the meaning of life, which is to do what you can while you're here, for the people around you, which is, they are Jesus showing up at your door every day, certainly has given me the orientation. So you can look at my life and say, oh, you do a ton of corporate work with executives, et cetera, et cetera. You do a bunch of nonprofit work and some work with churches that's specifically religious, but mostly we're neutrals, and working in the secular world. But it became clear to me a few years ago, it doesn't matter what context I'm in. It doesn't matter if I'm at Apple or Cisco or, Walmart. There are people and children of God in all of these places who are in pain. And if you can hand them something that will help them, it doesn't matter what context you're in. When you do it, you're still of service in the world.
Awesome. And we're done pretty much. What's the one thing you're most fired up about right now?
Well, one of the things that was a big piece of last year, of course, was speaking at the